Hey, this is Tyler with TJack Survival. I was asked by one of my viewers to do a top 3 knives. I'm sorry, man, I just can't do that. But I am going to do a top 10 knife, so stay tuned. All right, guys, let's talk just a little bit about me first so you know where I'm coming from and why I picked the knives that I picked. For about the last 4 or 5 years, I've been demoing knives for Blade HQ. I've also been demoing knives on my own channel for about the last year. I've got about 20 years in the military, and I grew up on a ranch. We constantly used knives to cut hay bales open, to skin things, to trap when I was a little kid, fishing, hunting, all that type of stuff. So that's essentially my background, and doing those tasks and my lens of the way that I look at the world is going to dictate what I choose in a knife, okay? So basically the way I was raised, the things that I've done historically, if you will, are what will drive how I pick my knives. Now, it's really hard for me to say even just a top 10 because there are so many knives in the market that are so very comparable. It's disingenuous for me to say this one is better than that one. However, I will say that I like this one versus that one because it has these attributes versus those attributes. Are there some trash knives out there? Absolutely. Am I going to cover them here? No. So when we talk about knives, I had to really sit back and try to take a outside look and say, what criteria could I use to say that this is the best knife or the top knife? Because I have literally demoed hundreds of knives over the past few years. So having been to the field constantly, used them for different tasks, used them for similar tasks, I tried to base it on when I'm not filming, what do I actually use? When I'm out just playing, what's my go-to knife? Well, this is the top 10 list that I have for these knives. In no specific order, these are the knives. Now, I had to include a couple of big choppers, even though they're kind of pushing the hatchet boundary and leaving the knife boundary, they had to be in here. So my favorite knife, probably overall of the big choppers, are these two. Not one more than the other. But since I grabbed this one first, this is the Bark River Golock. I used this knife when I went and filmed with the Boulder Outdoor Survival School with Kirsten Reckness. Ended up giving her that knife when we got done filming because she needed a really good one, and I ended up getting this one for myself. Now, why did I choose this? Well, because it chops so well and it weighs so little. The reason that's important is this. When you are dealing with exhaustion, when you've been out for days filming or in a survival situation, it's incredibly important to not slip and cut yourself. And that happens to just about anyone when they get tired enough. So barring a safety discussion, that's why I choose this knife. I've added a lanyard to it so that if I do drop it, I won't slash up on my leg. I always try to kneel down when I chop and to make sure that if I do miss, it'll go into the ground and not into my leg, even though I don't ever want to chop in the ground and mess my blade up. But anyway, the big chopper that I use probably the most is this Bark River Golock. Its long, wide blade gives me the ability to create hearth boards really well. It's great for turning brush into firewood when I'm in a less wooded area. It's very lightweight compared to most of the other choppers. It's just an absolute win-win for me. The convex grind on it makes it so that it stays sharp in the field very, very long. And in fact, I've used the crap out of this. It has no nicks on it, and I've never really done anything more than strop it to sharpen it up. The next one on my list, or two, because I kind of put them together like a pack, is the American Knife Company Denali and the Shenandoah. So this American Knife Company Denali, when I first grabbed it, I thought it looked a little bit strange, to be honest with you. But it performed flawlessly. I could not believe how well it performed. I used this last winter all the time to make bow drill kits, and when I was filming with Live the Adventure, Lenny's channel, Live the Adventure, and it just plain worked. The things that I like about it are this. I can go a little lower on the handle and get a little more leverage. I can choke a little higher on the handle and get that small knife workability with the fine control because my finger goes right there against the blade. The larger blade gives me the ability to baton should I choose. It also gives me the ability to make long flat surfaces. As an example, use it as a draw knife or use it to create a hearth board. I did that quite a bit with bow drills. I've been teaching a lot of bow drill, a lot of people how to do the bow drill lately. And this is my primary go-to knife for that type of a task. The interesting thing about a knife like this is you literally can take this one knife and do everything with it. Should you? Probably not, but if you're going to, this would be an easy one knife solution. However, the one cool thing about this is the sheath, not just the knife. It's got a magnet in it, okay? So it ends up pulling the knife, and as an example, this knife is not all the way in, it's just kind of hanging there. That's because of the magnet. Once I slide it deeper, then it also has the friction of the sheath. Now, Jim Noka from American Knife Company basically come up with the concept on these sheaths. And the cool thing about it is they are ambidextrous. He was mad because he always had to spend extra money on a left-handed sheath, and because he's left-handed. So what he did is just created a sheath that will handle a knife both right-handed and left-handed. Because of the fact that it uses grip friction from the leather in conjunction with the magnets, it grips the knife very well. And again, this one, you can see it just hanging there. That's all hanging on by the magnet, and now it's hanging on by the friction. So the Shenandoah, it's a good partner to this big knife. The reason it's a good partner is because this small, tight, easily controlled knife shape makes it real easy to do fine woodwork. It's got a nice sloped ramp right there for your thumb. It has a nice secondary spot here for your finger so you can choke really high. It's got a 90-degree angle spine so I can do fire with it. And this knife, as you can tell, it's been a bit used. I've still got some stuff on the blade. I just need to clean it up. Anyway, this is an excellent skinner, an excellent fish gutter, a great secondary knife. So the combination setup here, I've often, for a very, very long time, thought the best way to have a knife or a single tool use is actually to have two. So I really like the fact that we can piggyback this Denali with this Shenandoah, drop that on your belt, and you have your two options. So if you need to chop, make a hearth board, do something big, you can grab that. If you need to do some fine work, some skinning, something little, you grab the little one. That's kind of a no-brainer as an excellent solution. Okay, the next one, and I'm going to skip to this one here, is my Bark River Bushcrafter. I use the crap out of this thing. It has a little bit thicker spine than most of the thinner knives that I'm used to. That's a positive thing. It's incredibly robust. And I don't know if you can tell here, but there's virtually no patina on it. I've pretty much abused this knife, and it's taken just a little bit of patina. In fact, I did actually try to put some vinegar on it just to see what it would do, but this 3V steel just basically doesn't corrode. Now, if you abuse your knife and leave it in salt water, you're going to corrode just about anything. But that's a major positive for this knife, is that it has that 3V steel. Also, it's a Scandivex, which basically means a Scandinavian convex, or a long sloping convex. I really like that. It kind of handles like a Corvette versus a bus. If you get a Scandinavian grind, it's like a bus. It just goes in a straight line where you push it. If you get a convex grind, it's like a Corvette. It curls and goes wherever you want, which makes it excel at making stuff like a feather stick. In fact, let me grab this stick here. So if I start to push, this is a really ugly stick, but you can see as I start to push, I'm already getting nice hefty curls that I could use to start fires with. So that's one thing that Convex absolutely excels at, is in the creation of feather sticks. Okay, so that's one of my other ones that I like to use quite often. My only complaint about this is that the sheath rides a little high. I could fix that if I really wanted to. It's not that big of an issue, but that's the positive and negatives. Overall, I love this knife. I ended up designing the sheath with my daughter. I got a nice ferro rod on there I use all the time. It is a great solution to a bushcraft knife. I'm going to shift this down a little bit more too here. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Fallkenven blades. I have 3 of them, an A1, an S1, and an F1. But the one I like the most is the F1. Again, because of weight. When I'm out running or jogging and I want to bring a knife with me, I don't want to have a lot of weight, but I do want to have a lot of function. And this F1, the Fallkenven F1, gives me that function. Now this is 3G steel, so basically it's a laminate on the outside of stainless with a high carbon on the inside. Let me show you that real quick. I don't know if you can see, but there's kind of a line right here. And that line is the difference between the stainless and the high carbon. Now I've used the crap out of this knife, that's why it's a little bit ugly. But because it's got that 3G steel, it's incredibly robust. I haven't been able to rust it. I pretty much just use it, wash it off, and put it away. So I've abused the crap out of it. But the big positive about this guy, it's little. It's big enough that it can handle some abuse. It's small enough that it's a good skinner. It's just a great overall knife. And one thing people forget, you can use that little puppy right there as an upper socket for a bow drill. Just put it on there and grind along. So that's another thing that's really nice. And it works so well because of its sloped shape. And you can kind of see a little bit of rubber kind of ground off because I've been using it as a socket quite a bit. So some of my absolute favorite knives are Finnish Puukos, the Scandinavian, Norwegian, Swedish type knives. In Finland, and I'm just going to grab this one because I'm talking about them, they make a 4-inch knife called a Puukko. Essentially, it's the traditional knife used by the Sami people. The Sami people are the indigenous people in Western Russia, Northern Finland, that area. Think of Santa Claus and the elves, okay? That's what I do. Essentially, they are people that herd and ride reindeer. They live in the northern Arctic forest. And I'm a big fan of, as I've said many times, of traditional designs, because I figure that thousands and thousands of years have passed, and that's given them plenty of times to work out any of the kinks and design the best shape. The only thing that I think we should ever add on to a traditional design is modern day construction technologies. I don't think we should drastically change it because I think they figured it out already. So with this Puukko, this is a custom knife that was made for me by Osmo, and I'm going to slaughter your name, Barulden. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I don't speak Finnish. But he used a Rossetti blade, so it's very high carbon with slight patina on it, and this thing has just performed flawlessly. It cuts really, really well. It's very springy and sharp. It just kind of chips really well. Tried a little bit on this feather stick here. Yeah, if I'm not cutting too deep. There we go. This is really a rotten log, so a bad log to use for feather sticks, but as you can tell, it cuts right through, gives me some nice big chunks. I could probably get some smaller chunks too. Yeah, it'll just shave paper off there. So anyway, this Puukko is a great knife. A vast majority of the people that I've worked around that teach or do a lot of primitive skills, they're all using these kind of knives for a reason. He's got a nice birchwood handle. I can't remember what it is. It's basically the knot from a birchwood tree, and it gives it a slick feeling, which is good because that way you're not going to blister yourself if you're constantly carving something. When I was a little kid, I took a 2x4 and I carved it into a sword and blistered my hand up so bad. I was using a Leatherman tool, just messed me up. So you wouldn't have that issue with this. Now, one thing that I gotta mention is this sheath. This thing is just amazing. He added a dangler for me, which is really cool because that way I can wear this underneath a Gore-Tex jacket or something in the winter. He also added this string, and that gives me the ability to throw it around and wear it like a neck knife. So I really like that. I just kind of wrapped the excess string so that it's not too long around there, because I hate cutting string because you always end up needing it at some time or another. So if you're looking for a neck knife, this would be one of the best design types that you could look for. It's some of the most lightweight because of the handle material, very incredibly robust, and just a phenomenal knife. A lot of people from Morris Kohansky to Cody Lundin like this type of a knife. You oftentimes see them using the Mora of Sweden, which falls in the same genre. Now, this one I had before I had that other guy. This is also one of my favorite knives because it just functions really well. This is the Heli Temagami, if I'm saying that properly, and it was designed by Les Stroud. This is, I'm going to call this a North American take on a Scandinavian knife. The reason why I say that is he's got a full tang back. So they take that burl wood, that's what I was trying to remember. They take that burl wood handle from a birch tree and they added a full tang blade to it. then they still have that laminate stainless steel with the high carbon on the inside, and it's proprietary to their company, so I don't know what steel type it is. And it still has that little pin in here, which gives you the ability to use this as a hand drill if you needed to. But this one is a little bit different in that it's going to have that little finger cup there. It still works very well. I prefer knives without the finger cup. That might be the only negative I have about this thing. But the major positive I have about it is it's linear to the point. So what that means is when I'm pushing on it, or when I'm cutting in some wood like this to grind something, it's very easy to control. It makes divots very well. It gives me very, very tight controls. Again, this is a Scandinavian grind that I have kind of rounded almost off to convex. And again, it's gonna make phenomenal chunks of feather stick. Shaving stinky little pieces, super thin, paper-like pieces with this. So that guy works really well. It is a very high performer, very lightweight. It's got a drop sheath, and I added some dog bane cordage the other day to it because I wanted to wear it like a necklace. It just gives me options. Okay, the last two. A lot of people think a survival knife should be this heavy, high carbon steel that's got coating on it. For the most part, I'm not a fan of the majority of those knives. There are two major exceptions for me, however, though. The first one I'm grabbing here, this is the Brothers of Bushcraft Bob knife. This is the second one I've had, that's why it looks so clean. I'm going to use this in a future demo. A friend of mine helped design this. His name's Mikhail Merkriff, and he runs Emberlit. I'll be doing a demo with this knife with him in the future. But as you can tell, it's very similar in its design to a lot of these Scandinavian Puukos. That's probably why I like it the most. It's kind of like a beefy Puuko that gives you a little bit more meat, so if you're less educated on how to use a knife, you can beat it up more without having negative repercussions. So there's that one. Now, the final thing that I've got here is the Brakimo. I'm not gonna go into full depth on this because I'm gonna demo the crap out of this in the jungle in about a month. So this right here is probably one of my favorite knives with this shape size because it has a larger blade, a thinner handle, and then it's got a couple of those little sockets that you can use for bow drills. I just did a bow drill with this like 20 minutes ago and it knocked it out very well. Okay, so what is my #1 favorite knife? I hate to admit it because I love all of these knives and I use them a lot. But if I were to sit and think about what do I constantly grab and use the most, it's this knife right here, okay? This is the Forest knife by American Knife Company. It is a slightly changed version of the Skogum Bush tool. And a little bit of a story on the Skogum Bush tool is this. Morris Kohansky basically said, the ideal knife will have these characteristics. Someone else, I apologize, I don't know who, basically designed a knife called the Skogum Bush tool that had those characteristics. Other people have made different versions of the Skogum Bush tool. They've either added things, subtracted things, but this is the version that I like the most. Largely because it doesn't have a big, fat, heavy pommel on the bottom. It works really, really well. Partly the reason why it works is because it has one continuous angle from base to top. So there's no actual straight lines, which means that it flows when it cuts. This one is a Scandivex, so it's a Scandinavian grind with a convex angle, which means that it's going to stay sharp for a very, very long time. It doesn't have a finger guard in there. So the Sami people would basically call this an adult knife. Once you use a knife long enough to stop cutting yourself, then you can get rid of the finger guards, which gives you a little more tight control. The closer you get to the center of an angle, the more leverage that you have. The closer I get to the tip of this, the more leverage I'm going to have to make deep cuts. That's why it's important to have that ability to go close to the finger. Also, the more leverage I have, the easier it is to make these nice fine cuts, okay? So if I can bust out a couple of these little feather sticks, and they are thin as paper. So that makes this knife a very great, feather stick making knife. It's a great skinner. It's a great bushcraft knife. It may be one of the ultimate knives possible on the market. While I love all of these other knives, this is the one that I use the most. I use all those other knives pretty darn regularly, but this is the one that I'm constantly finding on my hip. It's the one I'm constantly finding in my bag, the one that I use the most. And ironically enough, Dave Westcott, that runs Backtracks and Rabbit Stick, picked this knife out of my whole pile and said that this is probably the one that he would pick. So anyway, guys, I hope this huge discussion has been valuable to you. It's just my thoughts and ideas and things that I've picked up over the years on why I like knives, what I want to see in them as attributes. If this has been valuable to you, please hit the subscribe button. If you got questions, leave them down in my discussion box. I will make sure that I put a link to every single one of these knives somewhere in the discussion box on my video. All right, guys, hit the subscribe button, and thank you for watching TJack Survival.